Shelina, there are three reasons why I'm deeply humbled and overjoyed to connect with you today on Sunday Sips. The first of which, you are a fierce and unapologetic force for healthcare equity, a TEDx J&J speaker, lifelong activist, PhD genomic scientist, empathetic global leader, storyteller, and trusted friend. You've been such a gift to me during my medtech innovation journey, and this is truly a conversation we've been nurturing over the last decade together. And this leads to my second reason I'm so humbled and overjoyed to curate this discussion. You have continued to press against normative corporate culture and conventional thinking. You equip and mobilize activists in a wider range of healthcare equity contexts, and the status quo flees from you in terror. You are a force to be reckoned with. It is an absolute privilege to let our audience experience the weight of who you are and bring them into your rich journey as you're actively finding a sense of wonder and self trust. My hope is by the end of this conversation, our fellow medtech and pharma collaborators will glean a deep inner work methodology to empower them to progress from shame to sovereignty, from performance to presence, and from fear to freedom. So thank you for stepping out and helping us find our way. And
Oh, Joe, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And I felt the weight of myself in your introduction. So
I'm not even
looking
done with
forward
it.
to get into it.
There's a third part. So the third and final reason I'm so humbled and filled with joy for this conversation is I have no idea where this conversation will take us next. I prepared plenty of questions and planned on exploring a case study where we cultivate identity and belonging, navigating corporate masking and adaptation, and find a path to liberation and self trust to discover a confidence to build towards something new. But I'm genuinely intrigued and curious where we will go from here. So, Shelina Ramnarine, you have a remarkable big brain, and it is a privilege to officially welcome you to the Sunday Sips podcast, where I carefully curate the latest big brain insights worth sipping on. That's all I got. So let's get to work. There you
Let's
go.
do it.
And other, note to the viewers, I'm parenting 4 kids and I'm in a 4th-generation home. So like who knows if grandma pops in and things, but we'll continue to press forward and really excited to have this conversation with you. Hey, it's Joe from the future. I'm so excited for this week's episode of Sunday Sips with Shelina Ramnarine, but I recognize that you are incredibly busy, and this might not be the best time for you to sit and enjoy this conversation. So just in case, I want to share 3 reasons on why I think this conversation could be deeply valuable to you in your journey, and then you can decide if you're in or out. So first of which, Shelina is a PhD powerhouse, healthcare equity activist, TEDx speaker alum, and honestly, just a wonderful friend. And this is a conversation a decade in the making. We have wound our journeys together over multiple years, and this is the first time we've curated a conversation like this for you. So we went into a lot of really interesting and nuanced spaces around innovation and just personal self-development and having this deep sense of self and intrinsic value. And I think you're going to get a ton out of it. Second, by the end of this episode of Sunday Sips, you'll glean a deeper inner work methodology so you can progress from shame to sovereignty, performance to presence, and fear to freedom. These are 3 progressions that Shelina breaks down through her own personal stories and experiences in industry. By the way, I'm parenting 4 kids over there. And the third reason I think this is going to be valuable for you is we're going to explore a case study in finding ourselves and finding this deep sense of self. So we're going to do a little bit of storytelling first, looking through our connection, moving from TEDx J&J into a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative I started called InX that Shelina supported, as well as how we're both moving into entrepreneurial spaces together in our own ways. We actually start a business at the end of this call in 10 minutes, which is pretty cool. So if you've ever thought about starting a business, I'm going to show you how to do it in under 10 minutes. The second part, we're going to go through Shelina's journey from moving from a PhD in human and statistical genomics, I think is how you say it. It's just bigger brain than me on so many levels. And then she's going to share her journey as an activist and taking that methodology into how she's worked over the last decade at J&J, and then how she's continuing to progress healthcare equity and helping people find their own words and their own story that they can tell. And then we're going to land on Shelina's 5 big brain ideas to become unapologetically me. This is going to be wonderful. The fifth idea will surprise you. So, anyway, back to the conversation, and you could sip on that. And, another quick note to the viewers: I'll do everything I can to make the language of this discussion as inclusive as possible for folks who may not be as deep in medtech or pharma, or also like race and health equity. And I normally record a second SIPS deep dive where I break down highlights of this conversation for people that need a bit more. So that way you could speak at your level. Additionally, we will transparently discuss race, ethnicity, and equity, gender dynamics, and other touchy but necessary spaces. So I invite our viewers to lean into the dialogue, as it may be uncomfortable at times to face this. But beyond everything that I've shared, I'm curious how you would describe the essence of who you are.
Oh my gosh, the essence of who I am. I don't know if anybody's essence can be reduced because we are so many different things. And I've always been a person that likes complexity. I think it's so interesting. It intrigues me. I'm very curious. I love to like dig deep, like a squirrel. Like I'm just like, oh, let me like follow this, you know? So I don't know if I could describe my essence, but I guess what I can say about myself right now is that I have been in a season of refinement and a season of preparation. And one of the things that I have been refining is really my ability to embrace and accept my voice. And I'm really looking forward to having that conversation with you today because this is something that has probably been a challenge for me for many, many years. And you and I have talked so much about this and what that experience has been like for me because of many reasons, you know, being an immigrant, being a Black woman, being a woman, being someone I think who's probably a little bit more direct in their communication style, right? So there are many layers as to why that has been a challenge for me from the external view, but also internally, like self acceptance, learning how to love yourself, learning how to hold rejection, and learning how to figure out what are the spaces that truly honor, see, and accept you. So I feel like it's going to be a rich conversation. Don't know if I describe my essence, but that's where I'm at and what I wanted to share.
No, it's a beautiful start. I've planned this conversation, and all the different threads we could go down are just endless. So I'm really excited to lean into it. I'm sure people will get pieces of it bit by bit. I guess where we could probably start is just our interaction, like the first
Yeah.
meeting. So we both had the privilege of doing a TED Talk with J&J early in our career. For me, I think I was on year 3 at Johnson and Johnson. You had been there for 2 years. You were pretty new, right?
Yeah, I was really new. I
Yeah,
was like year one,
yeah.
going into year two.
hmm And it was wild. We were part of a cohort, I think, of around 14 speakers. They brought in
Yep.
Broadway actors and actresses to coach us on how to do storytelling
Yep.
and find that big idea that we were building towards. And that was so formative for me that eventually pushed me to content creation and executive leadership and how to speak at that level. And your talk was absolutely remarkable, as well as some of the follow up conversations we had that we'll get to as well in this discussion. So maybe if you just want to kind of walk through what that experience was like for you, how you
Yeah.
went from Trinidad and Tobago. I think I said that correctly. If sorry if I
Yes.
missed you know, and your journey, and maybe that'll get us moving. So I'll give you some
Yeah.
space to tell that story as like a mini TED talk, and then we could unpack pieces of it and move from there.
Sure. So I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, as you mentioned. I was born there, lived there till I was 10, and I grew up. My dad is half Black and half Indian, and my mom is Black. And I grew up with my dad's mom and his family. So I grew up with an Indian family. So, you know, it's a small community. I live in kind of like the equivalent of like Alabama to Trinidad, like very country, you know, very small community. Everyone knows everyone from like generations back, basically. The house that my uncle lived in, like my grandmother's dad built and got land, you know, to then pass on to the family. So very community oriented. And in general, I feel that Trinidadian culture is very expressive. We're very expressive people. We tell you what we think. We're very big on communication. So those are cultural values that were kind of like instilled in me in the beginning. And then moving to America, I moved to Georgia. It was a very different culture, context, climate, environment. I went to a middle and high school that was created out of desegregation and meant to integrate, black and white in the South. And so I learned a lot about just racial dynamics in America because when I moved to America, I looked black, so everyone thought I was black, but I was black in a different context. So I had to learn what it was to be black in America. And then in college, I joined a Black student group, and they were like, you need to be in this group because you need to learn things about what it is to be Black in America. So I was like, okay, sure. So that was a really nurturing experience. And then I went to grad school in St. Louis at WashU. And I still remember I was hanging out with someone and they said, a guy has been shot by the police and people are gathering on the street. And then the next day, we went to a church where community was gathering. And I had a lot of friends in grad school that were getting their master's in social work. I did my PhD in human and statistical genetics, so very, very different than social work, but I had a lot of friends in this social work school.
Hey, pretentious engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but this episode of Sunday Sips is caffeinated by Kinetic Vision. Throughout my decade-long career in surgical robotics, I've worked with many medtech consultants, and without question, Kinetic Vision stands in a league of their own. They masterfully curate the art of science, accelerating innovation through advanced technology. Their capabilities, creativity, and candor have consistently made them my most trusted digital external innovation partner. We've collaborated across continents and time zones, tackling challenges and unconventional ideas and taking them from white paper to fully functional MVPs. Their contributions, from early concept generation to usability studies, test automations, digital twin creation, VR simulations, and beyond, have been pivotal in moving breakthrough ideas towards real-world clinical use. My partnership with Kinetic Vision has been a decade in the making, and it's an honor to introduce you to their world-class capabilities. If you're facing technical challenges beyond what you can do in-house, I trust Kinetic Vision to help you find the path forward and empower you to innovate on behalf of global patients and the clinicians you serve. Finding the right partner to drive digital transformation within your organization and product pipeline is critical to the long-term success of a medtech business. So check out the link in the description below to take the Digital External Innovation Readiness Assessment, which includes a waitlist for experiencing a discovery session with Kinetic Vision. It'll take you less time than it takes to finish your coffee or tea, and it'll provide you with greater clarity on if Kinetic Vision is right for you. Anyways, you could sip on that, and let's get back to Sunday Sips.
And that was when Mike Brown was killed. And, that was the first time I ever went to protest with my friends. It was a really enriching experience because, on the news, you would think that a protest is scary, it's violent, it's like people causing chaos. But for me, it was like so beautiful. Like, I remember there was a moment where they had the mic and they're like, does anyone want to sing? And I grabbed it and we started singing We Shall Overcome. And like, those are songs from the civil rights movement. And so I felt this like ancestral connection to like, here I am as a Black person in America, like saying it's not right how these people are being treated. Like there were so many underlying conditions in Ferguson that led to the Ferguson uprising, as it's been documented. And I felt like I was like playing a role in that and carrying on the legacy of so many people who had fought for that. And I remember thinking, what if I get arrested? Because I was really close to finishing my PhD and getting a job. And, I figured a job wouldn't hire me if I'd been arrested. But in that moment, I thought about, well, what if I have a kid? What am I going to tell them that I did during that time and how I showed up? And, how do I teach someone integrity if I don't have integrity? So when I came to J&J, I had just come out of that. And I was at an event in J&J where I started talking about the lack of data on people of color in clinical trials, because I did my degree in genetics and focused a lot on like race differences and how that impacts disease. Like, why do Black people get diabetes more, hypertension more? And so, like, that random moment of like, everyone needs to know about this, someone nominated me to do a TED Talk. And I remember thinking, I don't want to just talk about diversity in clinical trials because not everyone knows that topic and will be able to relate. So I titled it Why Activism Matters. And I wanted to rebrand it activist because I had such a different view of an activist from my experiences in St. Louis than most people. And to me, activists are innovators. They're saying, hey, this world doesn't exist. We need to create it. Here are the problems. Here are the ways that we can fix it. And to me, that's the same thing we think of as innovators, right? Like they're visionaries dreaming up a new future. And so that's what my TED Talk was all about. You know, I showed a picture of me as a little kid and said when I was in Trinidad, no one told me I was less than because I was Black. You know, I was just the little Black girl with the Indian woman. So I was different in that way, but it didn't dictate my intelligence, my ability, my, you know, having to step out of being a child and having to advocate for yourself. And that came from in one of the protests, I saw a little boy who had a sign that said, I matter. And he was like 4. And I was just thinking about the psychological impact of him carrying that sign, right? What is this moment going to mean to him as he gets older, knowing that from a young age, life is telling him he doesn't matter and he has to press back against that. And so I was one of 4 Black grad students in over 12 programs with 72 people. And it hit me in that moment that, you know, I'm going to be in spaces that most people aren't going to look like me. You know, as the first Black person in my PhD program, and while I was there for 6 years, there were no other Black people in that program. Yesterday, I met someone who used to work at Yale, and she's like, I've never met a Black geneticist. So for me, because I have this background of coming from uh, a under resourced country, I'll call it, right? And the odds of making it to America, making it to get a PhD, getting a degree in something so technical from such an amazing school, that experience combined with Mike Brown and everything I saw there just really created this like, I got to advocate for the people. And I don't think I speak for all of the people, but I know that the rooms that I'm in, people have no sense of what are the challenges that some people that look like me have. And so that's kind of became my passion. And I didn't know how that was going to work at J&J. When I gave that talk, I remember before I went on stage, someone came up to me and was like, you know, you're giving the first TED talk about race. And I'm like, thanks for telling me like 2 minutes before I'm supposed to deliver it in front of 1,500 people. But it was a really amazing experience. And it was, to your point, life changing and really kind of ignited like my life's purpose in a lot of ways, because I feel like as a scientist you want to bring forward the best ideas possible, and that whole experience taught me that it's not just about the ideas, it's also about understanding the people, the context and the environment in which they're in, so that you can actually create solutions that actually work for them.
Oh my gosh, it's so rich. There's so much to unpack there. And one of the things that you mentioned that always stood out to me was this like skin in the game that you had to navigate, right? That there's this moment where you've already overcome so much to get into those academic circles, to then step into a protesting environment and to question, like, what if I get arrested? What is the literal, like, what is the risks associated with stepping out and advocating for a marginalized people group, which you were coming into an understanding of being one, right? Because you were in normative Trinidad and Tobago, like you're just a person, right? And that race is a social construct, but in a U.S. construct, it's completely different. So you're coming alongside people that have grown up in this systemic injustice for their whole life and for generations. So, how have you continued to put yourself in positions where there is skin in the game or something that costs to step out and challenge organizations across the duration of your career? We'll circle back to the interaction me and you had. at dinner because I do want to get to that point. But I think it's something I've seen across your career is you're always pressing in, and there's a risk. We've talked about like during our sessions together, you shared like I want to be me without the consequence of being me, but you still choose to be me. You still choose to step out. So where does that come from, and how do you continue to nurture that in all these challenging contexts?
Yeah. Some people might think I'm crazy. Like I remember in a role I was in, someone said, "Why are you pushing back? Like you should just kind of say like, okay, and just do whatever they want you to do." And my logical mind fully recognizes that that's the easiest path forward for me, right? To not push back, to not challenge things, to just sit and make my money and be pretty. But I have always felt that, the first house I lived in didn't have a toilet inside, right? We had like an outdoor toilet. I remember being a kid, you have a pot underneath your bed, you use the bathroom in that in the night because you're not going outside with the mosquitoes in the night. I remember thinking I was rich because I had hot water and electricity. Because before you had to like boil water when you wanted to bathe, right? So like when you have, I mean, this doesn't even exist in America, at least I've never seen it, but it's like a switch that tells the water heater to like heat your water. It's like automatic in
Yeah, they have that
America.
in Japan. It's awesome.
Yes, I
Yep.
went to Botswana and they have that as well. And I was like, oh, childhood. So, the context in which I grew up is just so different than the life that I live now. And I feel in many ways that I'm like a statistical anomaly. So I feel like you can't be a statistical anomaly to get here and just sit and chill and look pretty and like, make money and live your life. Like I feel like I have been brought through so much for a reason. And I feel like that moment in St. Louis, just understanding the context of who I was and how rare I was just for my identity markers, not even like me, the person, has just really made me feel like I need to continue to challenge myself. And maybe it's also the like academic in me that loves a challenge and like gets intellectually bored. So maybe this is also why I choose things that are a little bit more difficult.
Yep.
But to me, it could be very easy for me in my life to kind of say, I've made it. I'm just going to sit. I'm going to chill. I'm going to like just go on vacation. But to me, that's not what life is about. And I've always felt a strong sense of purpose. And I don't challenge things to challenge things. I'm also not just trying to take on extra problems because I'm bored either. But I feel like at the end of the day, I have to be able to look myself in the eye. And so, in all of the roles that I've had at J&J, I had 6 roles over 5 years in sorry, 6 roles over 8 years in 5 different functional areas. So there was a lot happening in that short amount of time. But for me, I've always wanted to be in every role to the best that I could. And that meant if I feel like something's not right, I'm going to say it. And I'm so grateful that I had really amazing leaders in the beginning of my career who loved that about me. They thought it was passion, they thought it was courage. They recognized what it takes to go against senior leaders. And they were phenomenal leaders that had so much humility that honored that. They looked at it like I was giving them a different perspective than they had, and they really valued that. And it enabled me to rise pretty quickly because, they just kind of saw me as like someone with this great leadership potential. And then I went into this other environment that didn't value that as much as leadership potential and saw it as a problem. And I started getting some, negative comments around that. That, again, because of all my identity markers, were very layered and very hard for me. And I lost my sense of self because I had always known myself as this upbeat, passionate person. And so being characterized a little bit as like mean was like, whoa, me? I'm mean? Like, I know I'm direct, but I didn't think I was mean. And I'm so grateful for that because it really forced me to sit with myself and really forced me to better understand myself. And so, like you were saying, how, you and I were talking, and I said, I like me, but I don't always like the consequences of being me. I realized the consequences that I didn't like is sometimes the rejection that comes with truth telling, sometimes the isolation when people don't want to hear your truth. or don't want to see things a certain kind of way. And, I shared a truth with you, and you could have responded very negatively to that, and you didn't, right? And here we are. And so all of it has taught me that I don't need to put so much pressure on my voice, on what I'm saying. What I need to be really focused on is who can hold my truth, who can honor me, who can see me, who can focus on what it is I'm trying to share with them. Because those are going to be the real visionaries that are going to get me, that are going to create space for me, that are going to enable me to expand. So, wild ride.
No, that's amazing. Let's lean into that truth telling, and I'll share things transparently from my journey because I think it's helpful. So, for a bit of my background, like I'm white, was it white? Not white facing. I'm white passing. I'm a quarter Japanese, so I've always identified with my Japanese heritage and roots. My grandfather. This will lead up to the moment, right? So, like my grandfather was first generation Japanese, born in Hawaii. Japanese citizens were interned in concentration camps, but he actually fought for the Japanese military in Germany. Met my grandma, who was
Mm,
German, got married, came back to the US, had 8 kids, gave them all very white names, only spoke English in the homes, renounced a lot of their Japanese and German heritage because
mm,
of the racism against those groups, right? And the aggressions against that from World War II. So I grew up with that narrative over my life. And I was trying to reclaim aspects of being Japanese. I never associated myself with privilege. In reality, like I grew up in a very white suburb, looked super white. I had all these different things that were afforded to me. And I started to face a lot of this privilege through my journey in college and into industry, being part of multi ethnic, multiracial churches. I cared about these things. Well, be nice, Kai. They're fighting. Being called in. So the context for all that is one of the churches I was attending talked about, advocating for people of color. That was a language I had started to learn. And when we did our dry runs for a TED Talk, you had shared your whole story. And I thought that this is so impactful, not only for your people, but for white people to understand like this is what it feels like to step into a different context. And all of a sudden you're seen as a minority because you went from normative being black in Trinidad and Tobago to all of a sudden like in America there's a problem. So I said like I used the language colored people in some kind of feedback. And I thought I was being helpful. Like that I knew what I was saying. It was like there's so many connotations with that that are just completely off the mark. And you had an aside with someone else from J&J who's a man of color and discussed that a bit. And then during dinner we were sharing space and I had no idea what I'd missaid. You had processed that and carried the weight of that term and how I had spoken for probably multiple hours. And then at the table, you broached that topic. You brought truth into those spaces and you asked permission as you shared, which you didn't even have to do with me, but you kind of validated that I seemed like someone who wanted to grow in these spaces.
mm,
And you creating space for me when I'd not given space to you in that area was so deeply impactful in my career. We continued together to continue to advocate for equity at J&J and different initiatives over the years. But that moment was so transformative for me. And I
mm,
still trip on my words and think before I speak, right? As you're trying to grow and step out. So I just, I know that there have been moments where you've done that for people and you haven't gotten the response and the growth because people aren't always open to it. And it's hard to show up and wear that responsibility day in and day out. So thank you for what you did with me. Because like following George Floyd, you were immediately someone I reconnected with because I was already leading DE&I initiatives on my campus, and you curated one of the most incredible works that I saw J&J put out in these spaces with microaggressions, with which I still think even that label is a misnomer. It's just straight up aggressions. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how you curated something so sensitive in such a pivotal moment in the company to speak truth and to help everyone face like this is what the experience of being black in industry feels like, because that was deeply impactful at like a J&J wide level. It's something that we try to amplify within our work at Ethicon. So I want to give you some space for that, but also gratitude again for being with me in my journey of growth because it's had such a lasting impact.
Joe, I have had so many people basically treat me like I'm too much in that I'm like talking about race too much or highlighting things too much or being too sensitive about things. I've had many friend groups over the years. One time I had like an Indian friend group, and they were like, I don't understand why you're focusing on these things, because to them, I'm like smart, educated, successful Black person. Like, why are you even dealing with these things? They don't affect you. And so because I've had so many people not understand why this is important to me, treat me like or literally say, I shouldn't even say treat me, literally say you're making this too big of a deal. I have internalized that in many ways as like there's something wrong with me for it. And experiences like the one I had with you are just incredibly corrective, because they show me that it's never been about what I said. It's all about the receiver and how they wanted to handle it and how open they were. And I just also appreciate you recognizing how thoughtful I am in communication, and in the way that I express things, because the way that normally it comes back to me is, oh, your tone, which is also such a slighted way for people to aggress people. I'll use that word
Gaslighting.
without even recognizing that
Yeah.
they're aggressing someone.
Yeah. It's well, because you have the label of like an angry Black woman that you have to navigate, whereas these are injustices worth having passion and truth and correction around. And why do you have to show up to that conversation perfectly level emotionally for the party, the micro or major aggression, to be able to and willing to hear it and acknowledge it and correct it and change course, right? So I'm sorry for everything you have to navigate in these spaces
Yeah,
as you
it's
continue in
interesting because,
activism. It's
yeah, I
brutal.
feel like I have to manage other people's feelings so much and manage my own feelings, but in a way where I don't get to have feelings, but the other person does. And so that's why all of these things have taken me like years to process, because it's so layered and there's so many like feelings and thoughts and reasons around it. And I think the point that I've come to now is just like I can't control the other person's reaction. I can say things with the best care, love, intention, clarity that I can, and then the rest is up to the person. And what I've learned to understand is what it just reveals to me is alignment. Like that's what this was all about from the beginning, but I couldn't see it then. Was like you and I, we still talk, we're like doing all these things because we were aligned. And when you're aligned to something, you can't like mess it up. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I've learned that I've been trying to hold on to so many things that weren't aligned for me in my career, in mentors, in sponsors, in peers, right? And what I have come into is learning how to hold rejection and how to say, like, okay, well, this just wasn't aligned, because the alternative is I'm crazy and the things I think and say are crazy. And how do you build self worth? How do you change anything if you keep thinking you're crazy? So I just wanted to share that because I know people might grapple with that, like me. And I forgot what you actually asked me. I'm
You're fine.
sorry.
This is the beauty of this medium of conversation is really interesting, because I do a whole bunch of short form content, so I'm used to chasing like short attention span, and I love creating space to double back over conversations and for people to soak in it. So the question, to reiterate it, which is fine, is, from that moment with me at the table, you
Yeah.
continue to create those
Oh,
moments
yes,
at a
yes, yes.
larger
The video.
scale.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, I
and
got
there's
you.
and
I
I want to
remember.
even go beyond that towards eventually illustration, but this is kind of the step up
Yes.
towards that. Yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
So basically, I wanted to bring forth a lot of different things during my time at J&J. And I was so incredibly privileged to have the platform to do that and to push the envelope in many conversations. So I was chatting with someone right after George Floyd, and everyone was having conversations about their experiences with race. And it's incredibly traumatic to like relive some of these things. So I was like, why don't we make an anonymous video where people can share microaggressions that they've experienced in a professional environment? And then people could just play that so that people don't have to relive their own personal traumas all the
Yeah.
time, with like their face, like having to say them in front of their teams. And it was such a deeply impactful, humbling experience. Like, we listened to everybody videos. I worked with the production team to figure out exactly what snippets we wanted to put together in what order, and it was heartbreaking to see the things that people have to carry. So, like, I really appreciate you seeing and acknowledging the things I have to carry. And it reminds me that so many people carry so much. And we're talking about like a race in this context, but it could be you are navigating being a caregiver and you feel really isolated and no one is talking about that. And you have to carry that in your day to day. Like, so many people are carrying so many heavy things and don't have a space to talk about them. And I feel really privileged to have been able to create spaces for people to talk about the racial things that they carry and how it impacts them. And that video got a lot of views and was shared really widely. And I think a lot of the reason why is because it was so raw and authentic. And I don't think people are used to raw and authentic conversations in corporate spaces. But that has been kind of like my secret belief that I tried to like infuse in ways that I could at J&J. So like I also created an event on self-love where I like brought 5 women together and we just talked about self-love. And it was phenomenal seeing like a senior director talk about how she's learning to love herself, because people have this impression of people at certain levels of how they are, of how they think. And I just love humanizing people. I love peeling back the layers and exposing like we're all struggling with the same thing: love, belonging, acceptance, worthiness. And it's just in different forms. And so, to what you also mentioned, I got the opportunity to work on a project that was about creating medical illustrations. We found out that 5% of textbooks only have illustrations related to Black people. So for the longest before I started that project, I thought psoriasis looked red and patchy. Psoriasis would not look red and patchy on me. It would be gray. And I had no idea because I'd never seen that in a commercial. No one had ever shown me that. And so we built the largest library of medical illustrations featuring people of color. And because I'm a scientist, we got to partner with an academic institution to create a research study on it, because no one has created a large scale study on the impact of doctors not being trained on skin of color and their ability to diagnose these diseases in patients. And so the implications of that could be huge. And that was a phenomenal project because I got to create something that would add long term value in the community, but also enabled people to be seen and heard. And for me, that's what I love. I love the intersection of like science, community, unmet needs, emotional intelligence, and helping people express themselves. And it was just a privilege and an honor to do that in that project.
Oh my gosh, you're covering too much ground too quickly. There's so many spaces I want to take pause. So we're gonna double back over a couple moments on that and dig a little deeper, because I really want to highlight, like, it's incredibly remarkable work which you've done. I think you hit the highlights really well, but going all the way back to that first example of curating that video, one of the most honorific things you did there that I don't want people to miss is de-identifying members of the community. Because, like, and this is something I got direct feedback on, like, as soon as something like that happens, a racial crisis occurs, every white leader, which there's a lot of them within medtech, feel a need to figure out how to lead their team and upskill on diversity, equity, inclusion overnight and prepare themselves for whatever conversation needs to happen. So they just call the Black person on the team and expect that Black person to put all of their emotional trauma that they're already navigating and be able to show up not only for themselves but for the full team and for the leader, so that the whole group can figure out what's the statement and how do we move forward and what's the path. And then that person, if they're leading an ERG or employee resource group or things like that, they get hit and inundated with 10, 20, 30 different people reaching out, and they're still expected to progress their sterilization workflow or whatever they're doing to advance technology, on top of carrying all of that, on top of being a father or mother and helping their children navigate it. So the work you curated is incredible from an empathetic perspective, but I do want to challenge leaders that are watching this to be aware of that tendency of, oh my gosh, something just happened to someone who's transgender publicly. Now I need to find the one person in the company and fully upskill through that person because it's incredibly selfish and hurtful and damaging. To at a minimum ask permission, I think, is a step that a lot of folks miss in these spaces, which I'm not perfect. I tried to do with certain members of my team. I don't even remember if I asked permission or not. I think I reached out just to see if you were okay, was what I want to hope I did when that happened.
You did.
Yeah, so I guess, could you bring us into some, first of all, you can navigate anything with that you feel led to address, but also, are there certain examples from that video you can share? Like, there's certain quotes I remember that I've still carried with me of like someone just feeling entitled to be able to touch someone else's hair multiple times at interactions, and like how that made the person feel, like something that we know just shouldn't be happening, but this happens across the boundaries of race. So I want to create a little bit more space to soak in this one, and then we'll move up to the other examples you blazed through.
Yeah, it's so funny because I was just in Trinidad like 2 weeks ago. And I, like I mentioned, grew up with my Indian family. So there are a lot of like Hindi words for things that are in our culture. So for example, garbanzo peas, we don't call it that in Trinidad, we call it chana because that's like the Hindi word for it. And my aunt, she grew up in a part of Trinidad that was more black. So she was telling me how like she doesn't know a lot of the Indian words for things. And I was so surprised by that because I grew up with Indian people. So it's like normal for me. Like my favorite snacks growing up were Indian snacks, whereas my aunt is like, I didn't try that till I was older. And it was like so bizarre for me because I'm like, this is like so common. How do you not know this? But she didn't have that exposure. And so I bring that up in this context to say, when you don't have exposure to things, when they happen, you're playing catch up, right? If you're not like living with and in community, I love that word, in community, right? If I'm not in community with trans people, and then I suddenly have to make a comment about trans people, it's only human for me to turn to the only trans person I know and say, hey, can you help me with this? And I had to have a conversation with one of my friends around George Floyd that, like, it's not my responsibility to educate you. Like, I'm happy as a friend to share my experience, but I don't want to share my experience and then it helps you learn something that then you can connect with somebody else on. Like, that should be a byproduct. The part of me sharing it should be because you're my friend and you want to be there with me as I'm navigating this life thing, right? So, to your point, there's a value transfer there. And me like sharing with someone something, and then like, what is that value that I'm getting back? And how is that being realized to me? And not that everything has to be transactional, I don't think so, but I do think it's important to realize that like that is real value. And so to me, my thought on what you just said is like just being community with people. I love that I have friends in so many different communities. Like one of my good friends is from Belarus. And like I love hanging out with her because we have so much in common, even though we grew up in very different environments. And I think in general in America, I don't see people having a wide variety of people that they interact them with. I think a lot of people kind of like stay in their little bubble and like the people they know are very similar to them, maybe went to similar school, maybe have a similar life philosophy. But the way I grew up, like I'm Christian, but I grew up with Hindu and Muslim people. I have murtis in my house. Like I'm very versed in a lot of like Hindu mythology because it's interesting to me. And I just think if we led life with more curiosity and if we were in community with people more regularly, what you're speaking about wouldn't occur as much. And I think when that happens, it should be like a thermometer for us, like a litmus test of like, oh, I'm not in community with this group because I don't really understand them. How can I work on that? And I have a great friend that I challenged, like, and he was like, yeah, I need to work on being in community more with Black people. He's a white man. And I was so proud of him for like acknowledging and saying that because it's very easy to have a lot of ego in that and make a lot of excuses. I only have so much time. I haven't lived in this place with these people. I haven't met these people. Da, da, da. But like, I think if you're open and if you put that energy in the universe of like, I want to be in community with other different people and not so that I just learn, again, that's a byproduct, but to like really be with them as humans and live life with them, then I think you just won't be in this situation to that extent. So to me, whenever I see leaders do that, it just says to me like they probably don't have a wide people that they're in community with. And I like feel sorry for that, because when you think about innovation, you think about new ideas. If that's your community, how are you getting different ways of thinking and innovative ideas? How's that going to happen, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, what you touched on the last part was what I was leading. Okay, so we had started a group called INX, IN over EX, and it was inclusion over exclusion. And we believed that that was the ratio of innovation. That if you have more inclusive, diverse, inclusive teams, you're going to have better ideation, you're going to have greater trust, and you're going to be able to progress the technologies that advance global healing. I remember following the whole George Floyd situation as well. Like, we were put on an action team. You can't be on this side because you're not dressed. You need to go back. She's being free roam kid. It's my 6-year-old. She's great. So so anyway, like, we were tasked with go and educate the campus on what's going on. Like, we already had this initiative rolling based on feedback we had from women engineers in the organization that they were being put on more logistic, non-sexy engineering projects, being asked to plan team events instead of being given meaty design work that could help them progress in their career. So that was the first exclusion we were trying to call out and recognize. And when this occurred, George Floyd was murdered. We were tasked with like, well, how would
Mm-hmm.
you help this whole organization face this and heal from this and become an ally? And I remember one team member was like, we decided on leveraging TED Talks and doing these deep dives after the TED Talk. And one team member really wanted to get it done in one session with one leader with
Mm-hmm.
this great talk by a wonderful white woman around how to be an ally. And I was like, well, that's a great talk. And you feel that that's important. This, why would we not have the first session, like the narrative be from someone who's Black navigating racial injustice? Like, that already feels like such a massive miss for us as a group. So I drew a really hard line. We landed on 3 sessions that brought people on a continuum through
Mm-hmm.
awareness with, I forgot the speaker's name. It's incredible. It talks about how to de-escalate like racially charged situations. So the idea that you will naturally feel like like a black male is taller than he is, stronger than he is, more aggressive than he is. Like, those are racial biases that occur, and that creates a racial sense of stress. And he went through the experience of helping his son navigate. I can't remember the name. The murder, Trayvon Martin, and how he unpacked that with his son and what his son was feeling in his body navigating that experience and what it meant to him. And I wanted our organization to sit in that kind of story because we needed empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had the second session with that lovely white woman about how to be an ally. And then the third session was with Brian Stevenson. And um, like, he speaks a lot about the importance of proximity. Like, we have to become proximal to these spaces of pain and systemic injustice. He curated like the Freedom Museum, which I've been to in Georgia. And
Mm-hmm.
there's also a memorial he has for lynching victims, which is one of the
Yeah.
most impactful experiences I've had in my life, where they have all these inverted columns, like rectangular prisons hung from the ceiling in kind of a descending manner. And you can see every county where someone's been lynched in their name. And for me to like see counties where my family now lives and that history
Mm-hmm.
of racial violence that's occurred. So trying to bring our group into proximity is something that you need to steward with intention and thoughtfulness and in collaboration with the marginalized people, but to do it in a way where like you're also elevating that talent and making sure they're being seen and rewarded for it, because it's an extra effort on top of what they have to navigate in their day to day. And a lot of times they just get inundated with these emails and then they get called out for being behind on their work. And we wanted to lead with a different culture during that. So that wouldn't have happened the way that it had. I wouldn't have been equipped to lead in that capacity if you hadn't called me out at the table. Like, all these things ladder up over the course of our lives. So it's really cool to see what you've continued to do beyond that first talk. Um, I'll take pause. Do you have any thoughts on that before we revisit the illustration? Because I think you also missed some really cool things with that.
Let's go into the illustration.
Yeah. Okay. So for the illustration, like, I'd like to unpack eatrophobia to bridge to that. And
Mm.
are you familiar with iatrophobia, or like what
I
people?
had never heard that word before.
Okay.
When I saw you write it, I was like, what?
Yeah. So iatrophobia is the fear of the healer. And it's
Mm.
really common within communities of color based on historic experimentation that's been done on those communities for a range of generations. This is why there's a lot of fear within Black communities of the COVID vaccine. There's been there's a great book on it called Medical Apartheid that I worked through in community with some people as well. And one of those pieces is if you go into a doctor's office and you're speaking with a white clinician, and there's nothing that no one in there that looks like you when they're showing you pictures or symptoms or things like that, there's immediately a lack of psychological safety of, does this person actually know how to treat me? So could you explain a little bit more on like how much risk there is that clinicians aren't being trained on different skin colors, and what that also means to the patient and like their experience end to end, from a fear of the healer or a trust in what kind of diagnosis they'll get if they have to continue to get disproportionately higher second opinions because they don't know, like, just to kind of dig into that problem space a bit more, because you were able to advocate for J&J to leverage funds in partnership with academia to actually fix this systemic inequity. And I think that's beautiful, and kind of ladders up from all the work you did within the organization. So curious
Yeah,
to
so
taste more.
I can't fully take credit as
Yeah,
the
of course.
genesis of this. So, there's a phenomenal team that was focused on women's health, or the health of women, I should say. And they started this project in partnership with an external company. And they hired an illustrator to create 25 illustrations on a variety of diseases in terms of how they look in people of color, specifically darker tones. And then I was kind of like given this project when that team transitioned, and then asked to steward it. And what was really important for me, I worked a lot with our agency partners on tone, on framing, on the context, and how things were kind of being placed and messaged. Because power dynamics are very important to me. And it's not that we have the power, the people have the power. It's us creating a space and an opportunity for them to know their power, recognize it, and step into it, right? So I think what was really important is really understanding that, like, people know what they need, like, in a general sense. Someone might not know, hey, I need this biologic drug, blah, 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 but they know I'm suffering with this problem. Here's how it's impacting my life. Here are some of the challenges that I'm facing, right? And so the conversation with the provider, it's really like you're going to someone saying, these are my needs. And you're expecting them to be able to say, okay, well, here are the things that I can offer you to like fill those needs, right? And I think it just gets distorted sometimes when people aren't sure, well, do they really know? And then also on the other hand, it's like, can I challenge this person? Can I say that this person didn't really understand me? Like, a lot of people just kind of trust whatever the doctor's saying because they don't know. They don't know like what is the best medication. So there's a lot of power dynamics and a lot of vulnerability in that conversation. And so what's always been important for me in interactions, because I feel very passionately about the space of patient advocacy, patient engagement, helping patients get the right medications that they need, because there are many reasons why there are kind of problems or kinks, right? So it could be that, I used to work in the cardiovascular area. So it's like, why are people still getting metformin when there are better drugs for them? And maybe the doctor's like assuming that their insurance won't cover it. Okay, well, can we check? Okay, well, the doctor's really busy, the office is really busy. Are there ways that we could use technology to automate that? Right. So I think there's a lot of unfortunately areas where people can kind of like fall out or not get the best care. And I've actually been really interested in studying how often do people of color not get the standard of care, because I dove really into peripheral arterial disease in my last job, and we found that even in wealthy zip codes, because people tend to say, oh, well, Black people don't get great care because they don't have good health insurance. So in wealthy zip codes, even when insurance is the same, in PAD, I saw papers that said like Black people still don't get the best care. They end up getting a limb amputation, and 70%, it's a 70% mortality rate in 5 years. So I think sometimes we want to simplify these conversations and say, oh, well, patients aren't asking the right questions or they don't have the right insurance. But there's so much that can happen in that interaction, in that conversation, in a physician's perception of what the person is saying and what their needs are and what care they need. And then also how the person is understanding the agency that they have to push back on the doctor, the pressures in their life, how much mental capacity they have to like really dive into this. So there are just so many layers and dynamics as to why this is a problem. And so it felt really amazing to fix one thing, which is like, let's just get people trained, right? The delivery of the care is what I was just talking about. But if you don't even have the knowledge, how can you even deliver it? And I'm so grateful to have been able to partner or have J&J partner with that academic institution to study it, because there is no data on that. So I can't tell you what the dangers are because we don't know. No one has ever asked, which to me, the fact that no one has ever asked that feels like the danger. Like, what are the questions that we're not asking in healthcare about how things might be different, you know?
I need to have you on a podcast with Jessica. Like I mean, because we had a really great conversation around obesity care and how that disproportionately impacts people of color and just higher mortality rates and the challenges they have with getting the care they need. It's not as simple as just the wrong medical insurance plan. There's so much nuance on how you understand what you can and can't say to a clinician, where you can or can't get a second opinion. And to track that end-to-end patient care pathway is just such a critical piece of research to progress. Um, Incentivizing the right parties to look at it, that's always like the next challenge with R&D, right? Which is a lot of fun, but keep pushing that forward the best you can. Like, we have a lot of runway left, a lot of career left to figure out how we keep pushing into these spaces. And it's such a silly example, but I always love the starfish story, like the idea of like a whole bunch of starfish being scattered across a beach and some guy out there
Mm.
walking around and throwing them back in the water, and someone telling him like, you're wasting your time, like they're all gonna die. And he's like, well, it matters to that one. And he picks up another one and tosses it. Like, sometimes these systemic issues can feel so systemic and so large that there's nothing we can do to have an impact. For you progressed medical illustrations. For Jithika, she lobbied the government to open up reimbursement for obesity care and eliminating certain barriers that were unnecessary so that obese patients could actually start getting surgeries. Like, all of those were throwing one starfish in a much larger issue. And then as we progress in our career and our experience, it empowers us to solve some of the larger problems. But anyone in any space can do something within their circle of influence to make it better.
I'm
So
so glad you said that, Joe, because that is like similar to like my life philosophy. I feel like you just do the things that you know are right in the moment and in the space that you occupy, because you have no idea like what impact that's going to have in the future. And for me, there have been so many times that people, I think, have tried to silence me when I was doing what I thought was right or saying what I thought was right. And then there have been so many times that people have celebrated me when I was doing what I said was right. And so the thing that I really also want to share, adding to that, is that you kind of have to trust yourself. You have to trust yourself. You have to like let go of the shame stories, let go of the fear of rejection, let go of the fear of isolation, let go of the fear of abandonment. Because sometimes to go against the grain when it's not clear like how that's going to pan out, you don't know what that's going to mean for someone in the future. When I worked on that project, that was an incredibly challenging time in my life. I was facing a lot of negative stories towards me. And it was really hard to keep my sense of self and be advocating for something that I thought was really important. And I'm so grateful for all of those challenges because it has only renewed my sense of self. I know myself in a very different way now than I did before. I know who I am. I know how I move through the world. And it's moved me from feeling like I need to be ashamed of who I am and how I show up, to sovereignty, to being able to own myself, from wanting my belonging to come from the environment around me, to know that I belong to myself, to know that I, belong to God. I'm a very spiritual person. It moved me from a place of like, why is this happening to me, to knowing like, hey, this is all happening to give me freedom, right? And so that's why I wanted to share about shame to sovereignty, performance to presence. I feel like in the past, I was so busy trying to be liked, be successful, climb the corporate ladder, because I thought if I climbed, I could make an influence. And I didn't realize that I was making an influence all along, and that the greatest influence I needed to be was on me, owning me, accepting me, and fighting for what I believe in. And that's really what I wanted to share today, is that the path to innovation, to doing something different, to going against the grain, to being a visionary and creating something that doesn't exist is lonely and isolating at times, because not everyone's going to see it. That's why it's innovative. That's why it's new,
It's so
and
hard.
I think that's what, as leaders, as people that are pushing the boundaries, we have to like sit with and embrace rejection, embrace isolation, embrace not being understood, and knowing that our understanding has to come from within ourselves, from our own sense of self, from our own knowing, because you're never going to change anything on the outside if you can't see it, believe in it, and create it, right? And so I really just want to encourage people to like follow your own knowing, follow your intuition. I think in a world that's so structured and capitalistic, we sometimes think of those things as woo, as soft, as unimportant emotions, feelings, thoughts. But those to me are like the fabric of life, and everything else is just the output. So I say focus on those things, because when you get those things right, the output is going to be transformative.
You move so fast. It's so awesome. No, I appreciate it. One of the notes you hit on that spoke to me, I've done a year of all in entrepreneurship, which is kind of where we started to reconnect. And it is incredibly isolating. Like, I took this crazy jump after 12 relocations to get to Japan in a year, which you know about, but to catch people up for your community. Like, I made this messy exit from Johnson and Johnson into what I thought would work out great, whether it was landing a job in Japan or I ended up going into entrepreneurship to get higher leverage on my time, because we had 4 kids in international school, which is crazy expensive. Pulled a 75K personal loan to give us some runway to get business going, and failed at that. And you are continuing to step out and build in the dark and trying to make a product that's valuable. We hit zero, relocated to Chicago, started over, did another 8 months of entrepreneurship, pulled the 401k, zeroed that out, kept going. Now I'm in this really odd hybrid season of like, entrepreneurship's financially viable. I'm caring for my kids and looking for full-time jobs, and consulting. Like, I'm in a weird mix of, now there's potentially more opportunity, and how do I, gauge that across, what do I follow? But the season of learning how to trust yourself and finding that confidence is so hard. And I think that's why a lot of people quit. Like, you start to feel absolutely insane. Like, the risks I've navigated with 4 children, starting a business in a foreign country because I genuinely believed we could continue life there, is crazy. But it's revealed so much in my own character and resiliency, that I'm so grateful for, like, what it's turned me into, because I'm a radically different person than when I was in J&J. And to see people taking those steps in their own journey is super exciting. So, like, that's what lights me up. A question I want to touch on with you to kind of build around that. One of your recent links in LinkedIn posts, and we've talked about it in our sessions, is finding a contentment being held in community. We'll work into a case study where we hit the 5 notes that you want to. We'll round towards that next, because you're pulling it all in. But could you explain a bit about this experience of learning how to be held by community? Because it's something I've experienced in my own community that I've been building. We're up to like 180 people. And originally I thought it was all about me delivering value to make money, was the initial start. And what I've learned is like, that community is actually holding me up in my journey just as much as I'm holding them up in theirs. So what has that been like for you across the arc of your career? And how do you hope to support others in community as well?
Yeah, community is like deeply rooted inside of me because I grew up in such a communal culture, like I love that when I go back home, like my aunt on my dad's side will like cook food and like give fruits to my aunt on my mom's side, like I love that they bring each other food, which I feel like in America there's so many things like we don't think about the fact that we all have to eat every day. And I love being in that culture of context where like people will ask you, did you eat today? What did you eat? It's such a basic thing. And I think showing care for someone on such a basic level is like transcendent. Like, because to what you just said, I feel like so much of America is about adding value and providing value. And I think when I moved to America, reflecting on this now, of course, I didn't know this when I was 10, but like I remember thinking when I was a little kid, oh, America is all about how you communicate yourself. And I need to communicate about myself a certain kind of way so people see me a certain kind of way. Because I had a thick accent, I was chocolatey, I had natural hair that wasn't cool then. And so I remember there were times where I would read and people
I'm
are
sure
like,
you were plenty cool, Shelina, just in your own way. You just didn't know it yet.
thanks, Joe. I remember there were times where people would look at me like I didn't know what I was talking about. And I'm like, no, I am smart. You just can't understand me because of my accent. So I learned very quickly when I was young that America is all about communication and what people think is valuable to them. And that is a different context than how I grew up, where everyone knows each other for forever. So I don't need to add value to my friends. They just love me and know me because I've known them since we were kids, since we were born. And I feel like I have internalized that. And it has become for me where I feel like I need to perform for people. And it was also subconscious. It's only since I went on this journey over the last year that I've understood that, right? Like, will Joe like me if I'm not talking to him and saying things that are interesting or that he finds valuable? And it also came for me when I was 10. I went to fine arts magnet school and I went to my friend's house and her dad asked me about an aria. And like, I didn't know the aria that he asked me about. And the way that he looked at me, like, I still remember that for so many years because I was like, oh my God, I need to learn more things so that people don't think I don't know. And all these little things were cues that told my brain, if you're not performing, if you're not interesting, if you're not, saying enlightening things, you're not valuable to people. And really, that is transaction. That's not love. That's not real community. That's not really being with somebody. That's like earning it. And so I had to like deprogram myself that I don't need to earn love, that I don't need to earn my value, that I just am valuable, that I just am lovable as a human. And that like took so many months for me to wrap my head around because so much of our life in America mimics capitalism and adding value and this must be worth my time. And I find it to be so incredibly freeing to not think like that. When I was at J&J, I didn't focus a lot on like, did someone think I was like doing, like looking like I was busy? Because to me, you're so busy being busy that you're not really creating real things. I could recognize the mental and emotional toll looking a certain way created on my output. And whenever I would fall into that trap, I wasn't the most successful. I wasn't the most innovative. So, there's a lot of our lives that we live in performance subconsciously. And I just really invite people to like sit with what are the areas in their life that they're performing and not present for. Because I think the magic is when you're present and it's really hard to be authentic in today's world because you might have this fear of like, if I'm really me, is that person lovable? Is that person worthy? Is that person a great leader? I spent so many years wanting to be a great leader and wanting to like live up and have people see that I could be a great leader. And the more I have worked on loving me, of doubling down on me, the more self trust I build, the more I can show up differently, the more I have to give to people because I have more within myself. And so I realized that all of these things, they don't come from the external performance, they come from the internal presence with yourself, finding worthiness, belonging, your identity within yourself. And I'm not saying that, you can't find identity in your career, but it shouldn't be all of who you are, because what happens if you lose it? So I just feel grateful to have discovered those things for myself and be able to share those with others.
Now, this is absolutely fantastic, Shelina. And I think we'll kind of lean into the case study a bit on hitting these marks, because you're talking a lot about moving from performance to presence. You started to touch on identity. So if someone's watching this in their mid season in their career, right, they're in the first decade or so, and trying to figure out how they find this deep intrinsic sense of self, let's walk through the 5 talking points that we kind of rehearsed. We'll start with the first one, then we'll pause and we'll move to the next one. But you can share how you've done it, and then different applications that you use to nurture this. So the first one you shared was identity and belonging. Like, how have you nurtured a sense of identity and belonging? You've touched on it because it's informed externally by the culture we grow up in. Like, identity is nurtured completely differently in belonging in Japan than it is in a Western US context, is different than Trinidad and Tobago. So, how have you nurtured identity and belonging, and how can somebody do the same regardless of what context they started in? How can they shift it? And then we'll go to
Yeah, I
number two.
mean, they're like identity markers, right? Female, black, immigrant, right? Those are kind of like labels that I guess, get assigned to us, for lack of a better term. And those inform the way that we move through life. I have no idea what it would be to move through life as a man and how things would be different, because they are kind of like subconscious things that we all buy into, of what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to be a man, how a woman should speak, how a woman should carry herself, what it's like to be a black person, how black people should be, the space that they get to claim in the world, right? Like, those are all kind of like subconscious cultural constructs that we buy into, and they're just there. And to me, the journey is understanding, like, what are the boxes that people kind of have for me, and what are the boxes that I want to have for myself. When I was growing up, I didn't get a lot of messages of, because you're a woman, you can't be outspoken. That's not in my culture. But in American culture, I feel like there are more messages around what a woman could say and what a man can say, and what both of them are allowed to take up space in, right? So to your point, it's not just the boxes, but it's like the boxes in the context in which you're in. Because that could also be different in the Northeast versus the South. They're like regional micro differences, right? So to me, I spend time thinking about those boxes, but then also spend time thinking about what are the boxes that I want for myself. And it's really hard to step outside of a box and create it for yourself, because sometimes you might be thinking, do I have permission to do that? Like, do I have permission to, okay, I know a woman, let's say you don't want to have kids as a woman. I know a woman is expected to have kids and I don't want to have kids. Is that okay for me? Will people understand that, right? It's hard to go against the norm or the things that are expected of you. And I think that's where the self trust comes in. Sitting with yourself enough to know, like, no, but this is really what I want. No, but this is really like who I am. Like, it's not going to change. And being able to own that. And for me, owning that has come with accepting rejection, accepting loss that might come with that. I don't think I understood how important it is to embrace loss in life. We all talk about like things we want to gain and acquiring, but I don't think as a culture we talk enough about loss. And, I've lost people that I thought would be lifelong friends, places that I thought I would always be in that really embraced me, a vision for my life, that I had to build a new vision for my life now, right? And I've learned through that loss is as important as desire. It is so important to be able to sit with the things that you thought would work out differently and accept that they didn't. Because until you can let that go, you can't go on to what's next for you, what's meant for you. You talked about your journey and how, like, you thought it was going to work out differently. And until you can let that go, you probably wouldn't have been here.
Yeah, the learnings from hitting zero are crazy for me. It's just it's a position I never thought I would be in, let alone 3 times over the last year, and still seeing things track forward. And you talk about like being able to sit in it, and I think it's an area where it took me a while to really process it. And what I gleaned out of it was like 4 key learnings of extreme ownership, like recognizing that lack of skills, lack of know-how, risks I took, like actions I did and didn't do brought me there. But then also extreme acknowledgement of circumstances. There were things outside of my control that I didn't understand in that transition that also burned us. And then extreme grace, that as
Mhm.
we continue to live in the tension between circumstance and our capabilities, you're not always going to land on that optimal outcome. Sometimes you're going to land on a heavy loss, and to like extend love towards yourself in that failing is a skill set I'm so grateful
Mm.
that I found through that, because I didn't have it in my early corporate career. Heavily driven by like fear of failure. So it's crazy that I like took choices that would increase the probability of failure dramatically in my life. And then the fourth learning is just hope renewed to continue to try again, to get better, to make diligent incremental
Mm.
improvement, and keep working the situation and trust that you can land on a different outcome. But like all of that requires that soaking in the experience and facing it when things don't go our way, when we're impacted by a layoff, when we're let go because we are different, when things don't fit. um, that we're not promoted at the same cadence of other people because of choices we made that we thought was for the patient or the project or our personal development, that everything's not going to match perfectly on that continuum. So I just appreciate you sharing that, because I've been trying to, in my own life, nurture a sense of deep identity and belonging and
Mm.
figure out what my tribe looks like across all of this. Because there's one point when I was in Japan, I was in, like told my job would be ending. I was scrambling to get a new job in J&J to stay in Japan. I was negotiating with people. I did like 30 rounds of interviews with different people to
Mm.
get it. And it stole so much of my sense of worth to have done so much to get to this region on behalf of a company that immediately couldn't find a way to keep me in company so I could continue to provide value. I remember calling like a trusted mentor. He had invested in me for half a decade. I mean, he knows who he is if he ever sees this. Good people. And I was just saying, like, hey, like, what do you have for me right now? Like, if I returned into your world, like, could I project direct? Or like, and he's like, well, I couldn't have you on the team as an engineer because you're not an engineer anymore. Like, I'm not technical enough because I've been leading at this level. Odd. Okay, I'll hear that. He's like, and you're not enough of a leader to direct a project, which was so confusing to me. Like, he still had an imprint on who I was when I left, but beyond like who I become. And from a faith context, which you're aware of, it's the idea of like no prophets welcome in their hometown kind of thing. And I just had to realize like I had to stop returning to that well. I had to stop trying to go back to that space. There's some new space I have to step out towards. My identity can't be tethered to who I was in that life there. I'm stepping into some kind of new crazy identity beyond a decade of J&J in Japan. And I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to just move towards it. So it, the wandering's really interesting that you're discussing. It's been absolutely wild.
And it's amazing that you have the courage. I realize that making a change requires a lot of courage. And that's the like self-trust part. You got to trust that like I don't know what it looks like on the other end. I described it to someone as like I didn't know if I was going to find water, but I knew there was no water behind me. So
Gosh, it's
you
such
got
a
to
good
just
word.
move.
Such a good word. Someone dried up the. I can't remember. I always mix up my e's if it's Elijah or Elisha, Elijah or Shah. But one of them like had to spend time by a creek. That was where they were told to go. Be by the creek. Be sustained by the creek. And then the creek dried up, and it's just an indication to move towards the next. And I think that's happened to both of us in our careers. As we integrate faith in what we do, trying to figure out like what does it look like. Stop! You can't come back here, love. I told you already. It's my turn. Okay, then we'll trade in a minute. No, right now. No, not right now because I'm talking to my friend Shelina. She's great. No, Hezekiah, trade it over though, respectfully. This is so fun. Thanks for parenting, or thanks for handling my parenting. Hezekiah, you're gonna lose it all day if you don't listen to him now, because I'm on a call with my friend. So listen, please. I'm not gonna chase you. 3, 2. Good decision. Make a good decision. I don't have time. I'm talking to a friend. I might have to actually get off for a second. Hezekiah, fix it now or there's a consequence. Hand it to her now. Thank you. All right, we're good. Firm parenting, it's fun. They're playing Fall Guys. So anyway, that's all of my sense of belonging as I integrate fatherhood and hang out with you. Just fun. So moving on to number 2 in our case study, masking and adaptation. So how have you navigated this in your journey? And I
Yeah,
love
it's so wild because I once had a therapist tell me that I was masking, and I was like, "What?" Like, I didn't think I was. I thought I was just being me. And it took me a while to realize that I was masking because it was so much like a second skin that I thought it was mine. What I realized was I was afraid that like who I am was too much because I had had experiences with people saying that. And so what I did was I created this Shelina that I thought she is the most lovable. She is agreeable. She is smart but not too challenging. She shows up. She is bubbly. All of the things that people want. People want curiosity. People want agreeableness. All of the things. And then the other parts of Shelina where like maybe she has an opinion, maybe she's like tired today, maybe she just doesn't have the energy, like we just hide her because she's like not lovable. And I realized the challenge in that is like you are then telling your brain only a certain version of you is lovable. The other parts of you, no one wants that. And so you're creating your own disconnection from yourself within your own brain. And it's all in search of love, but real love embraces and accepts all of you. And I don't really know if you can really get real love from people that aren't really committed to really loving you.
Mhm.
So those are really hard lessons to learn. And the consequence of it is that I wasn't showing up for me. I was telling myself like, nope, I don't get to show up for you. You don't get this from me. And there was like my own internal fissure that I had to go back and resolve for myself, which is to be like, I'm sorry I made you feel like we're only lovable if we're in our summer season, when we're producing, when we're shining, when we're speaking well, when we have the great energy, when we know how to handle things. But what about when we're tired? When we can't say the things in the way we thought, when we can't write the email as quickly as we wanted to, so, I've learned so much about masking and learned so much about how to love myself in all seasons, not just the summer me and the spring me, but the winter me, the fall me, the moments where I need rest and not always pushing myself to burn out so much. And also realizing that, like, me being authentic and me being in integrity and alignment with myself is more important than if this person loves me or not. And the people who really love me, who are really meant to love me, will love me, even when I'm not in the summer season.
Mhm. And how does marginalization like impact or heighten the need to mask within your journey? So for a
Oh, code switching. It's a whole
yeah,
term. It's a
yes.
whole thing around code switching and how you have to speak, and what is considered professional and what is considered executive presence.
Hmm. I
And
have
what is
feelings about that topic. We have history in that space.
Yeah, I have done so much traveling over this last
Hmm.
year. When I left J&J, I've spent the last couple months traveling. I've been to 8 countries so far this year, and it's July. So it has taught me, it's been really great to like see the world from a new lens. And there's so many different ways to be in the world. There's so many different ways that people communicate. There's so many different ways that people express themselves. And I just think it's unfortunate that we try to create this box that we almost fit into. And I don't think creating that box is the same as having standards, right? There should be standards for how we should conduct ourselves. But I don't think we should make it look a certain way because it robs people of their individuality, their expression, and those are the very things that you need for innovation. So it feels kind of counter to what it is that we're trying to create as a society.
And you mentioned you did 8 trips thus far. This would be a nice tangent transition into the step 3, which is like liberation and self trust. And you initially were interested in having me work with you just from like taking risk perspective, like you gravitated to aspects of my story, which I wasn't expecting. But you were, I believe, recently impacted in your role, right? So you got severance, And while a lot of people would feel this pressure that they need to go out and secure the next job and spend 100% of the time networking and applying, and that's your life, you had like this inner voice that was like, you need to go and have these experiences and step out and travel to 8 different regions. I don't remember how many more on your list. And you were wrestling like, are you being a good steward in that space? There's financial risks associated with it. There's lead time risks associated with it. And I remember just sharing with you, like, I think that's the best stewardship you can be doing over what your future looks like. When I quit J&J, even though I had no cash flow and I pulled a loan to give us like the ability to pay rent, we went to a vacation to Zushi Beach for a week. And that's where I started to have the vision of like what I wanted to build towards with my community. Like that's the foundation came from that week of reflection. So I'm curious, like what inner work have you been doing across all that travel? How have you found liberation and self-trust during that experience as opposed to being tethered to a prescribed timeline of you have to get back on the market so fast before you're no longer valuable, like all these lies and illusions that happen when there's a gap that occurs. So yeah, I'll give you space for all of that as well.
Yeah,
It's been
I
really
mean, I guess
remarkable.
this goes back to like what we were talking about earlier of like pushing boundaries. Like, when I first, it started with wanting to go to Iceland. I'd always wanted to go to Iceland. I read this article that was like, this is the best year to go to Iceland because of like, cosmic events.
You got
And I
sold
was
on a blog? Was that what led the whole?
yeah,
That's
exactly,
awesome.
exactly. So I was like, I'm going to Iceland. And then my friend and I, we were like, let's go to Vancouver, Canada. That had been on my list for a long time. And then I saw a cheap flight to Copenhagen. So I booked 3 trips. And then I heard a voice said, well, what if you traveled every month? And I was like, I can't travel every month. I don't have a job. Like, what? And then I just said, but what if I did it? And so I just started booking trips. And it was like one of the best things that I could have ever done for myself because each trip ended up being a lesson about something that I was dealing with. So I went to Bonaire, which is still owned by Holland, and seeing the relationship that the Bonaire people have with the Holland government and the way that culture is expressed in Bonaire versus other places of the Caribbean was really confronting for me and really made me deal with a lot of the racial trauma that I had experienced. Going to Guatemala, I rode a ATV up a volcano, and
Awesome.
it was a very like spiritual experience for me. So each trip like unpacked another aspect of me, another layer of me that I may have recognized or sometimes didn't even know that I needed to dive into. And I don't feel like I would be me and be in this mental frame had I not taken those trips. So it definitely was like the right thing to do. But I remember talking to someone else that was impacted by J&J, and they said, I'm not doing anything. I'm saving all my money because I don't know when I'm going to get a job. And I was like, yeah, I know. My logical brain knows that that is the logical thing to do, but I had always felt like, yeah, I'm going to have another job. So what am I going to say about this time and while I was waiting? And I just felt this sense of like, I can't just be in this waiting season waiting. I need to be living. And so I just designed a life full of living in the season of trying to figure out my next step. And it's not that I don't want to like figure out what comes next, but I'm trying to not be so attached to it that I forget to be in the now, that I forget to live now and every day. So, yeah, I guess I do take wild, crazy risks in my own way, but it really felt aligned.
And it seems like your sense of like self trust and shoot, I lost the word. I'm cheating. People don't know.
Liberation.
Thank you. I have my notes in front of me so I don't screw it up. Like, what? How's that possible? I have a projector. I cheat. It's content creation. Like that sense of liberation and self trust. You seem to do. How would I describe this? There's something called retrospective sense making, which is really good for personal development, where you look back over your life and see indications that was leading towards your future purpose, and then you make a choice that continues to build your life. I do that a lot. I learned that in my master's in global leadership. You're almost doing future retrospective sense making. Like you imagine future Shelina looking back with gratitude that you made these choices to do this inner work, to position yourself for whatever comes next, regardless of the constraints and expectations around you, which is, I think, I don't know if I'd label it uncommon, but it's interesting. And it seems to be really fruitful in your decision making because you did the same thing when you decided to go to a protest rally, even though there's this risk of what you get. Like, what if you get arrested? But that landed you on a TED talk and then advancing healthcare equity on multiple levels. Like, future Shelina's grateful that you showed up to that protest, regardless of the risks that were before you. Where does that come from? That, like, what are you navigating in your thought life to lead to that discernment, to hear that voice and do it? Because I think that's something people could nurture. I wouldn't look at that as like you either have that or you don't. It's a gradient of learning how to trust future
Yeah.
use, retrospective gratitude towards choices you made. So how do you nurture that?
Yeah. When I was in grad school for 5.5 years, and it felt like
Nice.
my whole life.
Me
And it was so hard. Like, I remember crying on a bathroom floor one time. I remember
awesome.
spending a month trying to debug a program.
Mhm.
Grad school just
I did.
sucked so much from
I did
me.
mine from 2 to 4 kids. I started when my second daughter was born. I was like, I've made a terrible mistake stacking a career in children and school, and I accelerated it right before the fourth one was born, so that I couldn't do school anymore. I doubled my course load as we were expected our fourth. So I understand the crying on the floor. It's awesome.
I don't know how you did that too. I couldn't I couldn't do that. That's another level.
Yeah.
But coming out of graduate school, I realized that when I was in graduate school, I thought that it was almost like that was my whole life and would always be my whole life. Like, I lost a sense of context when
Mm,
I was in graduate school, and I held on to that of like I never want to lose context again. And I don't want to realize that things are temporary but make them feel permanent. So to your question, it's really interesting that you framed it that way because I do that all the time, but I've never like analyzed it in the way that you just did. And I think for me, it's that my mind just says, okay, all right, we're feeling this right now. If we zoom out, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, how will this place? Like people always say, like, do something today that yourself 5 years from now is going to thank you for. So it's like 5 years from now, whatever happens to me career wise, I'm not going to regret having traveled.
yeah.
Like, that is only going to help me. Maybe the downside is I don't have as much money in the moment right now, but I know it's not going to be something I'm going to look back on and be like, I didn't enjoy it, or it didn't expand me, or didn't add to me. And I do feel like I put a lot of faith in future Shelina. Like, oh my gosh, that girl, like, I got my whole life riding on her. And I just think she is going to win. And that, I think, is really the part of the question. Like, one is just the ability to stop and ask yourself, fast forward, how will I feel about this in the future? To your point about how you would recreate this, it's just asking yourself that question, right? Which I think everyone could do. The part that I think is harder is like, how do you trust the future you? How do you know that like she could handle it? And the way that I built that was looking back on the past me and looking back on the things that past me did that I didn't think I could do back then. So, I remember one time I gave a presentation and I didn't prepare for it and it went so well. And I was like, oh my God, I can trust me to like speak and like come like with good ideas in a presentation. And so I started like looking at little things that I've done and realizing that like, oh, I don't have to control me. Like, I got it. And then that has also built with travel. Like, when you have to figure, when you don't speak Spanish and you're in a country with most of the people that speak Spanish, you got to figure out how to ask for directions. And then you do it, you will learn to trust yourself. Like, I've been in some really wild travel situations where I just figured it out. And all of that built my self trust. So basically, it's like you can build your self trust by taking little risks, by looking back on things that you have overcome. And then the only other thing I would say is like that is a little bit of performance, and a little bit of self trust is part performance, but it's also part faith, which is not built on performance. Like I've never seen me overcome this. So I can look back and say, like, okay, I have certain skills, but I've never seen this one. So there is just a part of you that also has to have faith, which is not knowing, which is like not always having evidence towards it, but just saying, I believe it's going to work out. I think it's going to work out. And what has enabled me to have faith is almost like I got no choice. There's nothing I can do to control it. There's nothing I can do to make it happen. So it's this concept of radical surrendering, radical acceptance, which I struggled with in the beginning because I wanted to control things. And then I realized that control was really about safety. I was trying to control things because I thought that's what would make me feel safe. And the more I could put my safety within myself, I am going to be safe no matter what. I've got me no matter what. I'm stable with me no matter what. Then I didn't need safety from external things because I could create that for myself. So then I could say, okay, what would Shelina 5 years from now think? Oh, and we trust her because this one is safe with her. So that one must be safe with her. And then that's how I could kind of like make that thinking happen.
Well, and like I think self-trust is cousins with confidence. Like they're really close with one another, and confidence is challenging because you have to in some ways have done it before to get the confidence that you can do it again. But then it's the catch 22 of how do you get the first sense of proof to step to the next. So you learn to actually nurture as you take risks, you learn to nurture the sense that like confidence is a belief that future you will figure it out if you just keep
Yes,
stepping forward.
yes.
Like I've had this, I remember meeting with one of my like favorite mentors 3 days before I quit J&J, and he was just talking about like your tolerance for risk is unfathomable to me. Like, that was his
Mm.
whole thing, and he trusted that I was going to fail like multiple times and then become an overnight success and do a TED talk. That was his whole talk about it, which was really humbling and fun to think about. And I had a crazy sense of confidence that it would work. And then as things collapsed and that confidence was eroding, I remember my wife telling me, like, we have to go back to Chicago. And I was like, I don't know how we do that. Like, you show me how the hell we get to Chicago with no money and no job. But we did it in 20 days. Like, I had a whiteboard with 146 different check boxes, and we figured out how to exit the country in 20 days. And it took J&J $500,000 and a year to get us to Japan based on different COVID impacts and bed bugs and multiple transitionary housing. So I think you learn how to just keep stepping forward in the journey and getting the proof as you go to then take a bigger, farther step. Like you keep stretching towards the edge of unknown when you get that
Yes,
self
and
trust.
that's why faith is so important.
Yeah.
Like, you don't always need to have everything figured out. Like, I'm a very
Hmm.
intellectualizing person and I want to think about everything, I want to analyze everything, but it's having, for me, it's been having the humility to know that life is not always about me figuring it out. Some of life is feeling it,
Yeah.
which like sometimes I'm like, I want to describe it though. But again, that's really just me, my mind trying to build safety. I can feel safe without needing to understand something, without needing to know how I'm going to create it. Like I can find safety in faith, in hope, in trust, which are like some of these more softer things that you can't control, but it's learning how to tell yourself like it's safe for me to have faith.
Hmm. And I think to kind of keep moving towards the fourth point in this journey of finding self trust, how does culture, race, gender dynamics, how do all these pieces impact that, both in your story, but also for others? How do they find a way to navigate that journey within a different cultural context that might not be aligned with what they're feeling this inner voice pulling them towards?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it goes back to what we talked about with identity about the boxes, right? Like understanding the boxes that society imposes on you. And everyone has their own boxes. They're different, right? Like I might look at you and be like, Joe, you're a white man, you're very privileged, like, but you still have your own boxes. Everyone has their own boxes. They're just different boxes, you know? And I think for me, giving yourself permission to move outside of your boxes is key. And understanding that your boxes don't have to be your whole story. You know, like I could say that I'm an immigrant born in a developing country, but that's not my whole story. I get to decide what my whole story is. I get to create my story. I'm the author. I can say the things that I want to hold on to and be the box that creates a boundary for me. Or I could say it's not. So just realizing your own agency, your own sovereignty. Sovereignty is a word I don't think I ever used before, like the last year, but
Hmm.
has become such an important word for me because it relates to your freedom.
Yeah.
You're being owned by yourself, which I don't think I ever felt before. I think before I was so like caught up in like systems and like, okay, like I'm a black person, like I'm trying to be in corporate, like, and I just enabled those things to like dictate things for me. And now I realize that like I'm the one in the driver's seat. I have agency. I can belong to myself. And that has been like life changing for me in the way that I think and operate.
And for sovereignty, the other interesting nuance of that word that at least I feel is it establishes like a territory or what you have dominion over moving forward, as opposed to someone else being sovereign over you and your future and shaping it. When you learn how to step out with your giftings and navigate the risks and the rewards that come from taking those steps, you start to figure out like what is my territory or my domain that I'm building towards, and how do I steward that, and steward that
That's
well.
exactly what makes this word amazing. I just Googled it and it says sovereignty refers to the supreme authority within a territory. And exactly what you said, you are the one that has authority over you, meaning you have to hold you, you have to regulate your emotions, you have to keep yourself happy. Like it's kind of like to what you said about accountability. It's like learning how to have accountability over yourself, but not just in a responsibility way, but also in a like, so then you get to define you kind of
Yeah.
way.
So as you move into your current season of life, and we'll end with a little fun after this question, but what does your new territory look like? Like as you think about what you want to be sovereign over, what you want to build towards, because there's many different pathways. I talked about this with Jithica. Like she could either move into executive leadership and med tech, or she can go into consulting and like challenging organizations or personal coaching. There's all these different paths. So what territory do you have a sense that you want to start to take dominion over and build towards it and steward well on behalf of
Yeah.
those within it?
I want to design things that actually help people. Like to me, healthcare is such a like simple, basic form of life. Like if you don't have your health, what can you really do? If you can't get out of bed, if you can't walk, if your body doesn't function properly, right? So I've always been very passionate about healthcare because to me it's like the foundation of like your being and your like existing. And so I see myself staying in healthcare and I want to design solutions that actually work for people. And when I say actually work for people, to me, why I think health equity is so important and has been so important is because as a geneticist, we can understand your genes, we can understand your biomarkers, we can understand what are going to be the drugs that are best for you biologically. But if you can't navigate the healthcare system to get them, is it actually going to help you? So I love the intersection of like scientific knowledge about like how the body works, how someone's, processes are metabolizing, are continuing, are being enabled by drugs. But I think you have to layer onto that the social implications. What's the person's lived experience? What's their relationship with the doctor? How do they navigate care? What is their insurance like? What are other factors that are impacting how well they take care of themselves? And so I want to put those two together. I love being at the intersection of science, business, human design. So we will see what life brings me in that arena, but that is one of the areas I'd like to be. I think another area that I'm very passionate about is women's health. Learning so much more about fibroids, about endometriosis, about PCOS. It's just, I feel like we should all be appalled at the lack of knowledge in these areas and how they are debilitating women in so many ways, and it's so understudied. So that's another area that I'm super passionate about. And leadership development. Like, I feel like, how do we want to have leaders that are creating all these amazing things in the future, and we're not supporting emotional intelligence for them? We're not teaching them how to show up for themselves and other people. We're not teaching them about self-trust. So I love like doing work and talking to people about leadership development, because it all starts with you. It all starts on the inside, and then everything else you're creating is just an output from the input on the inside.
So beautiful. Like everything you're building towards it. One of the initial like questions I had is like, but Shelina, you're not an engineer. What do you mean design stuff? You're not a, you're not in, you don't have an MBA in commercial. Like, how could you actually do that? But if you have the right clear mission and vision on what you want to build towards, you can move across any discipline. Your PhD in what's the right word? Genome,
Human and statistical genetics is the like
human and
official
statistics
title.
genetics. Right? But that's just the foundation on where you can go and what you can build on behalf of the people you care for. So before we get to the end of this podcast, where
Yes.
you'll share kind of your last big brain insight worth sipping on, because you've already shared so much with the group, what we're going to try to do here, which I've never done on this podcast, I have to press magic buttons and see if I can make it work, is we're going to see if we could start a business in 10 minutes as an experiment. Right. So we're going to see if we could launch a business for you as an entrepreneur, because you're in this beautiful transition. And I want to disclaim, or like, I want to help people understand, just because you work in industry for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and you want to venture out and try to create something that helps people and serves people and is financially viable for you, it in no way disqualifies you from being able to boomerang back into industry. You can do both things in parallel. You can be busy creating something and attracting new opportunities at the same time. So as we do this, this doesn't mean that you can't be a director of innovation or director of commercial or whatever else comes your way, or VP or whatever happens, right? So, but from our conversations and coaching over the last month or so, I think it'd be fun to see if we could like launch a business in 10 minutes. So we're at an hour and 43 minutes into this thing. So my personal challenge is by an hour and 53 minutes, you have the capacity to connect clients or leads. And if they could experience value in partnership with you, that they could pay you. Like, we're going to see how that works. Right.
I love this push, Joe. And, I was so hesitant with the term
Uh-huh.
entrepreneur,
Yeah.
because that felt daunting. That felt like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, can I create my own thing? And I very much think of myself as a community cultivator, but the word entrepreneur was wild. So I share that with vulnerability to say it's so interesting the boxes that we put ourselves in,
Yeah.
as we've been talking about identity, right? And those labels, and how we get stuck in our own thoughts around certain words.
Yeah. So we'll kind of walk through what I do and then how we're
Let's
just going
do
to
it.
like copy the template. And so let me find my magic
Let's
buttons
do
really quick. This is going to be so wild. All right. So I have to click. I have to move everything around. I have all my cameras and screens. Let's try this one. And then that'll give you an infinity mirror. And then we'll put you back up there. And then we'll make that big. Okay. And then we have a tablet and I can sketch stuff, right? Oh, it's magic. Okay. So we're going to talk first about like how a very simple education community based business could be structured. This is what I've been running. I did about 4 grand last month, which is pretty cool. And it took me a year to build it. So, like, if we look at time and money, it looks something like this. So, this is like month 12.
it.
And this is like 4 grand. Right. But it ran at a negative burn rate that was like negative 220 for a while. And then I started to get clients around here. So we're going to see if we could accelerate that as an experiment. I'm so nervous. This is fun. All right. But I don't believe in anything get rich quick. You have to build with intention over time. But we're going to see if we could work through all the friction and start a community based business. So the way a business works You have a nice pyramid. At the top, you have leads. You typically get this through content creation. And then what we could do is funnel them down into a lead magnet. This is something that attracts people that see this podcast or short form piece of content or a LinkedIn post, or you start live streaming on TikTok. And then this could be a assessment, it could be a PDF, but in our case, it's going to be a free community. And then from there, you could move people into different product offerings. So this is where you would actually make money. So you could have a paid community. This would be like an inner circle. And then you could have maybe courses. So this is something that's more passive, where you capture the insights you have and a consistent pathway people can navigate to get an A to B result. So this would be like A to B results. And then you have what we would call high ticket. This is someone wants you to come into an organization, fly out, meet with the leadership team, help them understand how to advance a product portfolio that is like inclusive from a health equity perspective. This is when you're talking like, 8K to 40K depending on scope of work. And
Right,
this could go way higher depending on what it is and how you position
right.
yourself as a key person of influence. So, with all this, the structure that we can kind of play around with is if we build it from the bottom up now, we're not going to worry about content yet. This is the start to content with this podcast. But then we want to create this free community. This is all we're going to do today. I'm trying to move fast because I gave myself a 10-minute challenge. That's why I'm all scratchy. So this is going to be called, we've chatted about it, with words and wonder. And then I'm going to put a tag on it. But all this you could change, right? This will be yours. Living without an endpoint. So before we even jump into the platform and building and how this all will work, can you unpack like where this came from, what this means to you? Because we started with, we look at the whole arc, this idea of like, I want to love being me, but without the consequences of me. And how does this progress towards with words and wonder?
Yeah.
And then we'll play
So
around on the
this
platform. Yeah.
this is really just like me reclaiming my voice,
Hmm.
and really embracing all of who I am. I love writing, I love expressing myself. And so I wanted to create a platform to share different thoughts on so many different topics. Like, I want to talk about everything from codependency and how does codependency kind of like show up in your life to how do you create a beautiful like dinner table and have your friends over, because I believe in community. I also believe in like boundaries and understanding like what are the things that you're bringing into situations on the codependency part. So there's so many topics I want to talk about. I've written about yoga and yoga tools and how they've reminded me that you can get support by things all around you. You don't have to strain. Like there's so many ideas that I find in all facets of life that I want to share about. And my hope is that this becomes a community where other people share stories like that. They share stories of with word and wonder about things that they're thinking about, things that they're processing. And the idea is really to continue to express yourself and focus on your journey of like intentionality, of expression, of authenticity, and of exploration. You and I were chatting, Joe, and I was saying that for me, I have a deep belief in conversation. It's not necessarily about getting to an endpoint, getting to like a specific goal that you're trying to accomplish, but sometimes it's about the process. And so this space is really about the process and exploring the process with word and wonder.
It's so beautiful, and there's so many different ways you could take this community around that, and how you scaffold engagement, which we'll talk about in future calls. So what we want to create around all of this is a holding container. in its simplicity. This community is going to be bare bones when we start. We're going to launch with an MVP, minimally viable product. And then from here, and we're not going to do this today, you could then ascend folks. This is called LTV, your lifetime value of a client. So maybe they would then navigate $100 course, which is what I have in my community. And then they can move into a paid group, which we've talked about, like coaching TED Talks could be an interesting angle. We don't know if that's the stories you want to equip people to do on that kind of stage or something different. And then eventually high ticket where applicable, like someone just wants to work with you and they're really excited about that. So what we're going to focus on today is just how do we get this off the ground? You've given me your credit card information and your email. We're going to show
Trust
how
you
easy.
a lot, Joe.
I know you're crazy. You like sent it right over the phone. I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this. So let me jump in and we'll see if I can make it happen. So I'm going to give a tour of what I have, and then we're going to just copy it kind of. So this is my group. This is on a platform called Skool for anyone who hasn't seen Skool before. And Skool is a community building platform that's also designed with different monetization so that you can actually help people grow businesses here. So I have a group where I help folks with left brains, like engineers and global leaders. Right brains are creative and community builders. And then whole brains are your parents and entrepreneurs. And we're collectively, our little face is covering the bottom bullet. We're building the lives we desire, living where we want, loving what we do, and being paid well for it. That's the trifecta we're working at. And I give members of my community a free assessment to look at 3 dimensions of their journey, like how undefined it is. Do they have a lot of unknown unknowns? How disorienting is it? Do they not know what their next best step looks like? And how isolating is it? Do they not have people around them that have seen the level of success they aspire to? Because when I quit J&J and started entrepreneurship, I had none of this. So I've been trying to like help prior Joe, and this is all free. And then people in my community go through this assessment in a classroom called the Find Your Next Journey. So it's right over here. And they have a sense of belonging. They learn how to do the assessment and how to bring a friend into the group. So this is where you house your courses. And then the community tab, if we go to Find Your Next, I could see all these remarkable individuals that are building the lives they desire. Like Barnabas, he's also a person of faith. He lives in the UK. He's doing content creation full time, shares his origin state and his desired future state where he wants to build towards, why he wants this change and what he's afraid of. And then this becomes a change log for his life where the community can wrap around him and support him. So this is how I nurture leads. And then I have a paid community called the Big Brain Club Pro, where then I do weekly office hour calls. Once a week, I chat with this group. It's group one-to-many coaching. It's $100 a month, $900 annual. And then once a month, I'll bring in like a killer keynote speaker. So we did a series from C-suite to clarity. So this is kind of how you have different product offers. You nurture people in the free group, they interconnect, you provide them value and relationship for a long duration of time. And then some of them will naturally ascend into your paid circle or your courses or things like that. So what I'm going to do is if I go to my settings, Skool also has this affiliate process. How do I do this? We're doing it live. So if I go to affiliate, I can get a link, and anyone who starts a community with this link, they have to pay a membership to host a community on this platform. So it's either $9.99 a month to build like a platform with all the tools, which I pay for 2 of my groups, or for $9 a month, you could start what's called a hobby group, which is what we're going to do here. It's a cheaper way to experiment bringing people together. So I'm going to steal this link. I'm going to open a different tab maybe. And we're going to see if this works. And then we're going to erase we're going to share your credit card information with everybody. So now it says Joseph's inviting you. So this means if we start a community, then anytime you pay a monthly fee, I'll get 40% of that. The platform takes 60%, but then you could monetize and build whatever you want. All right. So your name is Shelina Ramnarine. Did I spell it right?
Yeah, Ramnarine, you got it.
Well, there's going to be plenty to pull from it.
I think so too.
Oh, it worked.
I just texted you.
Excellent. Yeah, we're in. I'm not going to save your password. Okay, so we'll jump back into like this as a podcast. All right, so these are the 2 plans. The benefit of doing $9.99 down the road is when you start to monetize a community. Skool charges a much lower transaction fee. So you get more of the amount that people pay for subscriptions. But this is a great way to start a business and see if you're getting enough traction that it's financially worth moving up to pro. This is what I had to start with. They just rolled out this hobby plan a week ago.
Mm.
All right. So then we're going to name your group with with word and wonder, right? Not
Mhm.
words. Can I do ampersand? Wonder. You can change it later. Oh my gosh, you're going to have a business. I'm so happy about this. After everything I've navigated, to see you get to this point way faster, like, I'm just really happy
But
for
it's
you.
really to be your encouragement, Joe.
Yeah. Well, and it's the lowest possible risk of starting a business on the planet. Like, just connect people in a space and see if there's something financially viable there. In worst case, you have a group to continue to stay tied in with for a season of life. So
Yeah.
with this free
Love that.
trial, you have 14 days to make $9 for it to be worth it. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
It's worth it even if it takes much longer than that.
That's
Um,
true.
all right. So you officially have a community. So one of the first,
Ah,
I'm going to give you some homework. So if you go
yeah, you
into,
gotta fill it in.
yeah, we'll give you, the first goal is to invite 3 friends to it. So the way you invite is if you go to settings and you click invite. I'll actually give you a full tour. You'll click this link and you can just text this to a friend, say, hey, I'm starting something. I don't know if you saw this podcast. I really believe in what I'm building here. I'm still figuring out exactly how things will flow. If you want to take a shot on this, here's the link. You'll have to download this app, Skool. I DM people in there directly. We have a community. We're going to start to do events, like, just hype up that you're building towards something and it's in progress. And people that genuinely care for you across J&J, all your other clients, friends, they'll all start to gather. People on this podcast that are curious about it will hop in. People from my community will hop in. So this link will immediately allow people to join. So actually, I'm going to copy it. I'm going to be your first member. So we go over to my group. If I type in this link, I'm going to join.
Aw, you're my first person,
I
Joe.
am. And my membership's pending. So then I have to go over to your tab. And then you'll have a nice notification probably. No, you won't. How does it work? Go to members. Oh, I have to refresh it. Be kind. I don't know what's happened. Apparently, I'm in your community, but you can't see it. There you go. So you get a membership pending request, and then you click it and approve. And I'm now in your business. I'm in your ecosystem. So if you go to members, you'll see me. But then the goal from this podcast is we can start to have people come in as members, and you can post in the community. So you can say, friends. I'm not going to post it spelled wrong. Such an engineer. And you can attach videos that you can record on YouTube. We'll talk about Loom as well, because I do all these asynchronous videos. You can attach documents. You can drive conversation, which I think you're naturally going to be an incredible community builder. So, Dee, you could delete it as well. So, congratulations, your first post. And then if we go to settings for tour, this will show like how many people have signed up. So this is showing your traffic. But the platform will actually start to push people to your world as well based on that about page.
Mm.
So what we'll want to work on is building an about page where you'll have some nice images or videos explaining who you are, what you're building towards. You could even put this whole podcast as a video on there for people to just fully know your story. Typically, you want to give them a little bit less context than that because this is a free group. And then you'll have your classroom to build in. So you could just create a new course and settings. But that invite link is the very first step. And then eventually you'll set up like payouts where you can connect a Stripe account. You can set pricing for different services if you wanted to make this a paid community instead of free, but we'll keep it for free for now. You could give affiliate commission. So if people invite people in and then they purchase a course, they would get a cut of that. So it helps people drive traffic to what you're building. And then there's a whole bunch of other metrics and power user things. But yeah,
What?
congratulations.
So
Yeah.
cool.
It's like there's a whole tech stack behind this. This platform's been built with deep intention. And also because you're now a community builder, I think you're automatically included in Schoolers. Now, Schoolers has around 50,000 people in it. And these are all community builders on this platform. This is where I post often. So like if you actually go to members and search Sasaki, you can find me. And then you can see all of the posts I've made on this platform. So I've made 357 contributors to all these other community builders. So like I share how I'm using this $9 hobby group to build my own business, sharing this that I'm not posting in my community right now because I want the members to start posting. So like this is a great place to learn from other community builders on this platform and interact with them. So you also have a space to learn. And then you're also in my community as well, the Big Brain Club. So we're interconnected. You're a business owner. Congratulations, you're an entrepreneur starting today.
Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate you pushing me, supporting me, encouraging me, and showing everyone how easy it was to do.
Yeah, and in the link to this, I'll post 2 links. Well, I'll post 3 links for people that want to connect with you and partner with you in your vision before we get to your last big brain insight. The first will just be your LinkedIn because that's posh and important. And when you're doing content out there, I think they're going to glean a lot from it because content creation is the top of the funnel. I'll post a link to join your community with Word and Wonder and for people to take a risk with you on what you're building and to see how this community evolves over time. And then the third thing I'll share is if anyone saw us walk through this in 5 to 15 minutes and thinks, I would love to create a community and start my own business, like this is something I want to do. Well, I could share my own link for affiliate. Let's just share yours. So if somebody uses this link, I have to go to affiliate. And I'll erase all your emails when they pop up. I'll share your Skool start a community affiliate link. So if somebody wants to get a $9 hobby group and just collect people around healthcare inequity, or maybe they really like playing Call of Duty and want a community to gather Call of Duty people, whatever hobby, interest, passion, or business they want to start, if they start a link with you and they pay $9 a month, they're going to be paying about $4 towards you and your entrepreneurial ventures. And I make money off affiliates. And now you can start making money off of affiliates as well. So it's another great way they could support you if they've ever thought about launching their own business. So we'll share those 3 links to get people wrapped around you. So with all of that, let me make it big screen and
Being
fun
held by
again.
the community. I love it.
Yeah, it's so humbling to see where this is all
Mhm.
landing. One more magic button for me so that it's all posh and professional. Gotta meet the standard, right? So, Shelina, is there anything else you want to discuss or share? Any big brain insight worth sipping on that we could leave our communities to reflect on? And then we'll end from there.
Maybe the last thing that I would share is, you are going to be your best investment. I have invested so much of my time, money, emotional capacity, mental capacity in myself, in learning how to love, accept, appreciate, understand me. And at times it has felt daunting. It has been challenging. It has come with a lot of sorrow. But I was thinking the other day that this version of me now is my greatest reward.
Mm,
No matter where things go with my career, what happens, getting to meet this version of me has been worth all of it. So, if you're trying to figure out how to own your voice, if you're trying to figure out how to find spaces that are right for you, what your sense of self is, what your identity is, how do you take that into something that, feels authentic for you? All of it starts with you and the investments you make in yourself and sitting with yourself and understanding yourself and just showing up for and supporting yourself and having your back. It's always going to pay off. Like that's never going to be a waste of time or not the right investment. It's always going to be the right answer. And so I just want to encourage people to like invest in you, show up for you, trust you, love you, because no one can do that for you like you can. And I think that's almost like the beginning and the end of things. It all starts with you.
it's just so beautiful. You've come so far. If no one speaks it over your life, like I'm so flippin' proud of you. Everything you're building towards in yourself and for others. And I'm really excited for what this next season of life looks like. It was such an honor to just create space for you after you've created so much space for me in my own
Mhm.
journey. So thank you for the time. Thank you for being a part of Sunday Sips.
Thank you, Joe. And I just have to just speak about you again for a second before we end this, which is just
Yeah.
like, I'm just so impressed by your humility. I'm just so impressed by your ability to put your ego aside and listen and learn and really process what someone's saying to you. I think that's like a really rare gift. I'm so impressed by your intentionality, your thoughtfulness, and just your listening. You just have a listening for people that I think is so beautiful. And it's an honor to know you. You push me, you challenge me. I'm afraid of it. You sit with me in that. And I just can't wait to see where this continues to take you.
Hello, hello, my big brains. It is Joe from way in the future, and we have finally finished this edit. So I want to share Shelina Ramnarine's 5 big brain ideas for you, just so you could sip on this and think about it throughout the week as you learn how to live unapologetically me. The first of which is to nurture identity and belonging. So, being able to have this deep rooted sense of self, your own intrinsic value, and also this sense of feeling like you belong wherever you may be, nurturing that. Number 2, progressing through masking and adaptation. This was a really interesting section of talk in which we look at all these different masks we wear in different cultural contexts. Race is also a main piece of this as well. But even for me as a content creator, as a engineer, as a global leader, as an entrepreneur, I wear different masks in different contexts in order to adapt and find my place. And it's something where as we grow in our sense of intrinsic value, we learn how to take off more masks and be unapologetically ourselves, or me. So I hope that one stuck out to you. By the way, after these 5 tips, I have a couple next steps that you could take, videos you could watch, links you could follow. So don't run away yet. Okay, number 3, finding liberation and self trust. Shelina talked a lot about how you could find this sense of freedom in whatever you step into next. And I talked a little bit about retrospective sense making, but how she kind of has this future perspective of trusting that she's handing something off to future Shelina that is incredible, that future Shelina can handle it and navigate it. And how do we live with kind of this radical trust in our life, in our future capabilities? Number 4, navigating culture and gender dynamics. There's so much there. I'm not even going to reprocess all of it, then just encourage you to be aware that there are gender and culture and race and ethnic situations that are always occurring and converging as we live across all of this intersectionality of our lives. And when you have an awareness to it of these dynamics, it allows you to adapt and move through different spaces while still holding on to the essence of who you are and your sense of belonging and identity. P.S. I'm on like 3 hours of sleep right now because I just got off of Amazon. It's on third shift. So like if my words are a little bit more muddled than this conversation, it is because I'm a little bit foggy. All right, last one. And then we'll have some next steps. Claiming sovereignty. I loved this part. Sovereignty and dominion. It's this idea of knowing what our sphere of influence is, where we can be activists and agents of change, where we have power, and to steward that well. And when we have this sense of sovereignty, there's an internal power that's released by that. So being able to be a little bit more rooted, knowing what we can impact or shift in the world we live in. Okay, so let's jump into some next steps. You can put this into praxis. And thank you for sticking along this far. If you've been here this long, like, subscribe, like, comment, do all the great things. Let me know who my next guest should be as well. But follow-ups, there's going to be 2 videos that'll pop up somewhere. The first of which is going to be a second SIPS, where I'll go through this episode a little bit deeper and expand upon areas that I thought were of interest. This normally comes out like 1 week later. So feel free to click it if it's there. And then the second video I'll share is recent Sunday Sips. Sunday Sips with Jessica J.P. Paul. At some point, I need to have the two of these folks together on one podcast because they're both phenomenal. So if you enjoy this chat with Shelina, you will definitely enjoy this conversation with Jessica. So concerning next steps with links in the bio that you'll find, I'm going to put at the top Shelina's LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with her, DM, reach out if there's opportunities that you have for her, if there's areas where she can consult or just ways that you want to cross paths with her. LinkedIn's a great starting point. But even deeper than that, you saw us launch her community with Word and Wonder. So there'll be a link you could pop in. All you have to do is type in an email, write your name, do a little mini bio, and you're immediately in her world. And we've been building this. It's about 5 weeks after we actually recorded this podcast. So she's making traction in the group. There's already, I think, 10 or so people there, and it'll keep growing once we launch the podcast. So if you want to take a shot on what she's building as an entrepreneur, feel free to go in. And if you go in, engage, do a post, interact with some other people, curate the space with her in partnership as opposed to just going there to consume, because the community's interacting, it's overlapping, it's beautiful. It's like when you go to a potluck, you bring a dish, right? Do the same thing when you join a digital community. So that would be my recommendation there. Also, if you were inspired seeing her start a business in under 10 minutes on Skool, and you've had this desire to just start a business and figure it out and take that messy action instead of having it perfectly laid out, perfectly complete before launching it, but just gathering people in a space and figuring out how you can move them into different paid offers. I 10 out of 10 would recommend Skool. I've made money on this platform. It's a beautiful, powerful platform, and I think it's great. So if you want to start a community, yes, yes,
Daddy,
yes.
are you putting your? I put it up. I put it in my head, and you put it right over here. Okay, Dada?
Okay, I think I understand. Wow, that's pretty smart. She put Legos in a Mario hat, and then she put the hat on. Incredible.
Daddy, Dad.
Oh, you want me to tie it? Yeah, I got you. Your head might have gotten too big, actually.
I like what they have.
Oh, sorry. 1 second. I figured it out. Yeah, let's try it again.
I put Lego in it.
Yeah, let's put your hat on one more time. All right. So if you want to start a community on Skool,
To wrap it up.
there we go.
Why
There.
did you wrap it up?
Yeah, it's how tight it's supposed to be left. I love my curly girl. If you want to start a community on Skool, there will be Shelina's affiliate link, which means if you do $9 a month for the hobby group, like she'll get around 40%. I really can't do math right now. That'll be like $4 a month to her. So if 10 people join, she'll make $40 a month, and that just grows. And as your business grows, you won't even feel that operation cost. And then if you then scale up to like the 99 per month because you actually have a larger amount of people going through and compensating you, and you want the lower charges, which is what I use, then eventually she'd be getting, like, we'll just do easy numbers of like 33 a month. But again, if 10 people do that, that's $300 a month passive. So there's a lot of people that make a living just by other people starting communities off of their links. It's pretty crazy. So give it a shot, and it's a great way to support her. She's getting her footing on these platforms. And then if you need help building your community, if you want to connect with other big brains, left brains, engineers, global leaders, right brains, community builders, creatives, and whole brains, entrepreneurs, and engineers, I am more than excited to welcome you into the Big Brain Club. So you can go ahead and check that out. There'll be a link. Oh, and then if you are like an engineer making cool stuff, particularly in the medtech space, but even in other industries, aerospace, whatever, I'll also add a fifth link for the Kinetic Vision. And I won't overplug that because I already did an ad insert at the start of this video. But seriously, top tier consultants in any kind of digital technology. I cannot recommend them enough. They have been massive for me on the projects I've worked on over the years. So with all that, you can sip on that, keep changing the world, and I will see you on the next episode of Sunday Sips. And I have some guests lined up that will surprise you.